So today we're going to be talking about Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. So this is Erikson's 8-stage theory that was heavily influenced by Freud's theory. But Erikson emphasized society and culture and the importance of them in these 8 stages and how there's plenty of room for growth throughout the entire span. And so we're going to go ahead and take a look at that, or at the 8 stages. And so you see here that we broke them up in columns. So you have age, crisis, virtue, negative outcome. So Erikson stated that a crisis could occur within each stage. And so the ability to succeed in each of these stages holds a virtue. But even with these virtues, if, let's say, there's like a failure to do so in these different results that equal virtue, you are left with this like reduced ability to like move forward in other stages without developing like an unhealthy personality or sense of self. And so that's where we get these negative outcomes that we'll look at also. And so the first one, we have age 1 years old. So you have a child who's looking to their caregiver for consistency. And in that consistency, there's a trust built. And with that trust, we are left with the virtue of hope. Hope that this caregiver will just, be consistent and there for the child. If there is a failure to do so, the negative outcome is fear and suspicion. And so, looking at the second stage, you have 2 years old, which is autonomy versus doubt. And so autonomy is this like asserting independence. So it's like critical for them to explore this independence in a really good environment, which will lead to the virtue of will. But a failure to do so, so if the child is in like an overly criticized environment, a negative outcome could be just like shame, or it could be a lack of self-esteem. And so for the third stage, we have 3 to 5-year-olds. So you have initiative and guilt. So children just take more initiative. They're regularly playing with other children. They're developing more of the sense of security. They are asking more questions, and they feel a sense of purpose. And so that's where you get the virtue of purpose. A negative outcome in this is if they are in a controlling environment, if they're overly criticized, which can lead to this negative outcome of inadequacy because they feel like this feeling of guilt, which kind of inhibits their creativity. So for the fourth stage, we have 6 to 12 years old. And the crisis is industry versus inferiority. So in this stage, this teacher plays a really important role, because the child is currently working towards competence, which is the virtue that we have here. There's this desire for approval and kind of like this pride in their competence. So this pride of them feeling just like more aware and knowledgeable and like successful. But the negative outcome in this is the inferiority. So if they're in a restricted environment, if the children aren't being encouraged, that negative outcome can be developed. For the 5th stage, we have 12 to 18-year-olds. So you'll have identity versus role confusion. So there's this transition that's taking place from childhood to adulthood. And we have even more of this sense of independence that is being developed, and this desire to belong in society, to figure out who they are. But this negative outcome, or I guess first their virtue is fidelity, and the negative outcome of this failure, or if failure occurs in this stage, is this confusion of who they are. So you get this rebellion. And this usually happens with people who kind of like develop the sense of unhappiness and are having this identity crisis because of the failure throughout this stage. In the next stage, you have 18 to 40-year-olds, and you have intimacy versus isolation. And the virtue here is love. So basically you have like this committed relationship that is occurring within the 18 to 40-year-olds. But a failure of that virtue is isolation and unhappiness, because they are avoiding relationships, which can lead to isolation and depression, and then later on, this just inability to form relationships in general. Then we have 40 to 65-year-olds, so generativity versus stagnation, and the virtue that they develop is care. So these individuals settle down in their relationships, they're feeling a sense of purpose, a place in society. They develop a welfare for others, which is why we have this virtue of care. But the negative outcome in this is unproductive, so these individuals are feeling just stagnant, completely stagnant in what they're doing. Then for our last stage, we have 65 and up. So the crisis here is integrity versus despair. But the virtue here is wisdom. So these individuals, they're slowing down, their perfect productivity, they're realizing that they've, through life, have developed a sense of wisdom. But the negative outcome in this is if they feel like they haven't accomplished anything, or what they wanted to do, this dissatisfaction, which is a negative outcome, and despair that they failed to kind of accomplish the virtue and everything that comes with that virtue of wisdom. And so we're going to take a look now at the social emotional development. We're going to look through some key terms and talk about them because they play such an important role with what we looked at in the 8 stages. So social emotional development is the development of the child's experience, expression, management of emotions, and the ability to establish positive, rewarding relationships with others. For the second is empathy. So the development of the ability to experience the emotional and psychological state of another person. And so this is kind of like knowing and feeling what another person is feeling, and so that is what's happening here with empathy. Impulse control is the ability to exercise voluntary control over behavior, so control impulses that help them like adapt to social situations and follow different rules. Then we have for number 4, social understanding. So develop an understanding for their responses. So understanding what to expect from others in communication, emotional expression, like we said, actions of others, and yeah. Sorry about that. So here we go. Just continuing on, emotional regulation. So the developed ability to regulate emotions and understanding of acceptable outcomes to emotionally charged situations in effective ways. So, and then we have number 6, sense of self. The social emotional development includes an emerging awareness of self and then of others also. So it's interesting, they become aware of their own preferences, characteristics, also those of others, but here just like responding, for example, responding to their name. So they have that ability. Emotional security, so establishing close relationships with adults is related to a child's emotional security and the importance of those healthy relationships. And then we have number 8, so it's responsive caregiving, supports infants in beginning to regulate their emotions and to develop a sense of predictability, safety and responsiveness in their social environments. So this is a huge support to infants in order for them to regulate those emotions. Then we have temperaments. Temperament plays a role in a child's expression of emotion, so the way they tend to behave, emotions they tend to exhibit. For number 10, we have affective. So here we talked about, or it's connected to the communication system. So tone is super important. So infants respond more positively to adult vocalizations, communication, etc., that have a positive tone attached to them. So the effectiveness of that. And then we have number 11, so it's self-efficacy, and it includes an emerging understanding that they can make things happen, so related to a sense of like competency. It's kind of like identified as a basic human need. So yeah, that wraps up kind of these key definitions in social emotional development, and then what we looked at with the 8 stages and Erikson's stages of psychodevelopment. Thank you.